We're going to break this down into different pieces. Let's go piece by piece. The first one is this. We have a new middleweight champion, ladies and gentlemen. Israel Adesanya defeats via KO Robert Whittaker in the second round at UFC 243 in front of their putative largest crowd ever, 57,000. Jack, how they announced that? It's like,
yeah,
here's a specific number, and a specific number, and a specific number, and then just a little bit bigger, non-specific number. In any event, they did. It was 57,000 and some change, and it was an unbelievable performance by Israel Adesanya. He looked, I said this on Twitter, Chuck, it was one of his easier fights, which isn't to say that Whittaker is an easy fight, but in terms of like losing a round or getting hurt, it was not one of those things. In fact, this is where I want to start the show. Biggest takeaway from the fight. For me, it is merely that. We'll talk about his ascendancy and comparisons to other greats who have made their way through the ranks. But just as somebody who watches this guy, it's just, you just have to marvel at his athleticism and his body control. You know, he's not Anderson Silva, but he feels like the prototype of what Anderson Silva meant to us. Remember when Anderson Silva fought Forrest Griffin and he was ducking and dodging?
That's what this reminded me of.
And everyone called it the Matrix, where here he is leaning and throwing hooks, and they're putting away, not some chump, Robert Whittaker, who was the champion. It was remarkable to watch a guy like this, and then he had his whole dance routine. Yeah. It is just nice to see a young athlete in their prime with this kind of physicality who can be not a new Anderson Silva, but again, to our new generation, a new version of what that meant.
To me, man, it was like a coming of age in a strange sense. Like, here's a guy who plans, first of all, to even plan that kind of dance routine in a situation where you're going out in the biggest fight of your career like that, and you could be roundly mocked if that goes haywire right off the bat. But he goes and does that. He was great all week. I think he met every media obligation. You know, he was doing all that, so he's very good up front of a fight. But he gets in there, and I feel like he's one of those guys who, in the escalation of the moment, he raises the bar for himself in each instance, knowing that he's going to clear it. And it's him showing the world. When he goes in there and he does something like this, I think there was a lot more doubt on this fight, obviously, because of Robert Whittaker. There was a lot of talk about, hey, man, both those guys in their previous fights were willing to die. That means they're going to be willing to die as they collide into this fight. And that seemed like it could be, you're watching it could turn into a very brutal affair. He didn't make it that way. He made it a showcase for himself against a guy who nobody showcases on or hasn't traditionally done that. And to me, man, I was like, in a very strange way, I've never seen a more meteoric rise to that kind of ascendancy in this sport. I've never seen it, including all the guys that, all the comparisons you want to make. To me, that was that big of a performance.
Chael Sonnen made a point, had a great video over the weekend saying, this guy killed all three things. He had the intro, which you alluded to, then the fight itself, and then he gets on the microphone already setting up the fight against Bohashinia. Now, we'll talk about that a little bit later. I'd actually say, Chael, while that's completely correct, I would use your argument a little bit and expand that. In every phase of what a fighter is supposed to do on media day, calling into radio shows, doing fan Q&As, signing autographs, whatever, bringing in his own team to make a show about him for a YouTube series. In every different version of what a fighter is supposed to do to contribute to their own well-being, to their own popularity, to their own ability to fight, as well as meet the UFC's needs, he kills it every time. Every time he kills it. And you also noted, not merely did he kill it, but some of this he brought on himself. They announced his name, he got booed. Yeah. Now, again, he had poked the bear a little bit with the Australian fans by making this like a sort of a New Zealand versus Australia kind of scenario in an amplified way. But at the same time, to have the presence of mind to perform like that, quite literally in the dance, to have the presence of mind to say what you wanted to say after the fight, then to fight that way after that big, long week doing all those obligations, Anderson Silva never did that. He was always kind of quiet and didn't say anything to the media. This guy handles every single phase of the entire fight week better than anyone I've ever seen.
Do you get the sense he's living something he's already thought through? Like, he's already imagined every scenario, and therefore he's only enacting exactly what he envisioned would happen. I get the sense that he does that. He's that kind of guy. Like, he brings whatever he conjures to his mind and starts to work over. He brings that into fruition. That's what it seems like he does to me, man. You go back to his first fight, the first UFC fight, when he goes in there and he's lifting his leg and he's hiking his leg and he's pretending to be marking
the yard. Yep.
Exactly. And it was almost, that to me spoke volumes for the way the guy felt about himself. There was a lot of hype about him coming in to the UFC from his kickboxing career. It told me that this guy already had an idea of what he wanted to do, right? And then here we are, 20 months later, and he's accomplished this. I feel like he's one of those guys, he thinks through his every move, But the only thing left for him to do is to go out there and execute it, and he does that brilliantly. That's that it factor. I feel like that's where the it factor comes in, is when people can't relate to the magnetism of somebody who can do that.
And going back to the haters, we'll see what happens after this one. I think some people will say, quite rightly, that Bohashin is a real challenge for him. But this fight was also about a coronation, not merely as the guy who could beat Robert Whittaker and then hold the belt, but a coronation of his own argument. That he has said, I am this person, and there has been this pervasive skepticism. I alluded to it in last week's show the entire way through. I don't know what quarter a doubter might have at this point. Where do you retreat to say that this guy is not who he says he is? He is everything that he says he is, and probably actually a little bit more, to be quite honest with you. I don't know if you've been a prevailing skeptic of this guy. This is a bad day for you.
Yes, and I mean there have been guys with similar trajectories in terms of there's new doubt because they haven't faced this style, they haven't faced this kind of guy.
They move the goalposts.
They do it every time, right? But I thought the way Adesanya handled it was almost workmanlike. Like he went about his business of saying, like I remember when he got the what was his third fight? He was fighting Brad Tavares. And it seemed like a huge step up. It seemed like people were like, ooh, too much too soon for a guy like this. And he handles himself. He goes and fights at Madison Square Garden. Because he's fighting Derek Brunson. There were a lot of people who's like, it's feast or famine. Brunson's going to try to take his head off. And there was a little bit of bad blood in that. Remember, if you recall that fight, and it's like he just punished his aggression. That was one of his first real good showcases, right? Like as he gets a finish in that fight. I just feel like whenever there's a doubt, he takes that doubt, puts it in his pocket and then just, dispels it, turns it into confetti. That's what he does. And he did that brilliantly in this last fight. I just can't imagine a scenario where he could have come off better. And not just in the finish itself and not just in like how he finished him, but dropping him right before the bell, right before the horn in the first round. So in other words, almost 2 knockouts against Robert Whittaker in one fight. I mean, I just don't think he could have done better in that fight.
Also, when he was making his statements, like he wanted to apparently have his dance routine at UFC 234 when he fought Anderson Silva. I would now get the impression that in some kind of way, if you had tasked another fighter with you have to come up with a dance routine, that would have added enormous pressure. I actually get the sense that the dance routine aided himself in the fight.
I got that sense too.
It made him be more of who he wanted to be, and so he was just ready to go as a consequence of that. Last thing about
tailoring to his mood and tailoring to his kind of motivations and things like that.
A man in full. The last thing I'd say about this is, this is not true 100%, but a lot of times there are violent overthrows in these divisions where when some guy takes over, like the real greats, when they take over with authority. BJ Penn choking out Matt Hughes. Now they've traded, but Daniel Cormier knocking out Stipe knocking out Daniel Cormier. John Jones beating Shogun the way he did. You can go on and on and on. Again, Anderson Silva beating Rich Franklin the way he did in this very division. Again, he didn't lose a round. I went through the stats. He numerically outstruck Robert Whittaker, and then, of course, from a damage standpoint, he outstruck him too. If you guys haven't seen it, you'll see it. Go undissected. That fight was not, I'm not going to say it wasn't competitive and difficult because obviously Whittaker made everything difficult, but in terms of taking damage, in terms of ever being in danger, this was not even as dangerous as the Marvin Vettori fight, which was a split decision in that sense. On every time it escalates, he seems to have an answer for escalating danger. Dude, that's what the greats do.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying he's one of the greats, but I'm saying those kinds of traits are ultimately what the greats, when you look back on their career, what they did.
And when they do that, that's when you have a real commodity in the UFC, right? When it becomes compelling to see how they might, outdo themselves in their next performance. And obviously, the way he handled himself in this fight, where I thought the scrutiny was at its absolute biggest for him, I want to see, honestly, like, if he's still the star that we're projecting in terms of pay-per-view buys and things like that. Like, is he that star? Is the national media going to get behind him and want to talk to him about all the facets of his life? Are we going to see like Esquire jump in and do a big profile on him, spend a day shopping? You know what I mean? If that's the type of thing we see, I don't know if we will. But the fact that he's handling his work that way and he handles himself so well out of the cage, I think that the next fight, regardless who it is, I think it'd be costly. But like if it's whoever it is, I feel like it's going to seem like an event times 10. I feel like it's going to have that kind of magnitude.